The Horsa glider was one of the most well-known assailant gliders used during World War II. Actually, did you know that the first units to land during the storming of Normandy did so by these gliders? It's even been estimated that over 300 gliders were deployed during the Battle of Normandy. However impressive they were, it is essential to note that they were far from perfect. The pilots who flew them faced countless challenges before even entering enemy territory, resulting in many tragic losses of life. Today, we discover why Horsa gliders were so dangerous. I'm your host, Ryan Socash, and you're watching It's History. Let's first take a brief look at the history of gliders in combat. The use of gliders in combat began with the German GFS 230 in May of 1940, which was used in Belgium. There were two different terms for gliders: assault gliders and cargo gliders. Germans typically used gliders to transport troops outside combat zones, whereas the US and British forces tended to use them as spearheads for large landing operations. You see, glider assaults held a unique advantage over parachute assaults. The troops that came in on gliders would all land in one place, ready for combat.
The parachute force will disperse by force. The wind will take them, planes will drop them in the wrong place and all of that. Specifically for the Operation Pegasus and here, that was an essential bit of the whole plan.
Horsa gliders typically had around 28 seats for troops, which was much larger than both the British Hadrian and the General Aircraft Hotspur gliders used for training, which could carry only approximately 13 and 8 troops respectively. Their production was primarily carried out by Airspeed and subcontractors, including Austin Motors. The gliders were constructed in sections, and production was spread across many factories to limit losses in the event of a German attack. Drawing from the World War II database, the first Horsa, which crossed the skies on September the 12th, 1941, was a high-wing cantilever monoplane with wooden wings and a wooden fuselage. It was built in 3 separate sections and then bolted together. The front section served as both the pilot's compartment and the main freight loading door. The main section was an accommodation for troops and freight, while the rear section supported the tail unit. It boasted a fixed tricycle landing gear and surprisingly was one of the first gliders to be equipped with a tricycle undercarriage for takeoff. The wings had large barn door flaps that made steeper landings possible. The pilot compartment was equipped with dual controls, and the hinged freight loading door on the port side could also double as a loading ramp. In order to help unload troops and equipment as fast as possible upon landing, the fuselage joint at the back of the glider's main section could be broken upon the aircraft touching down.
One of the big problems was that sometimes they were loaded with stuff as well. So you'd have most of it just men, but then you'd have a jeep at the back or something like that. And when they then came to a hard halt, the undercarriage broke or something like that, then the jeep or whatever cannon or artillery that was stored in the back would then come rushing forward immediately, and it would crush everyone who was in it. There are a lot of accounts of people being cut in half by the machinery inside when they crashed.
Operation Tonga is one of the most well-known uses of Horsa gliders, taking place between June the 5th and 7th, 1944. The main objective of the operation was daunting. The British 6th Airborne Division, commanded by Major General Richard Nelson Gale, was instructed to seize 2 bridges. The stakes were incredibly high, as capturing the intact bridge was considered necessary for the D-Day invasion to succeed.
The importance of that operation cannot be understated. First of all, they did a precision landing. They landed only 47 yards away from the bridge, silently took the bridge in a matter of minutes. They had to hold this bridge that crossed the canal, which basically divided Normandy in 2 parts. That reduced both the pressure on the Allies from the German defenders, but it also opened up new options for the Allies. So they could now go anywhere from this bridge, and they can continue the operation into the next day and the day after that and whatnot. And had that failed, that would not have been possible. It would have been dramatically delayed. which would have both made the operation itself more difficult, but also cost more human lives.
In honor of this, 2 of the captured bridges were renamed: Pegasus after the 6th Airborne Division's patron animal, and Horsa Bridge after the gliders that helped make the capture of the bridges possible. However incredible this story is, glider pilots faced countless obstacles, many of which occurred before even reaching enemy territory. Allow me to explain. Where other airborne vehicles had engines to drive them up to speed, the gliders instead had to accelerate by a tow rope that was usually attached to a C-47 Dakota transporter or Halifax bomber. As a result, during flight, the winds from the towing machines would often cause extreme turbulence. This, coupled with the constant acceleration and deceleration of the glider, often disoriented its occupants and made them very ill. The use of the tow rope was also hazardous because both pilots could release the tow rope at any moment. This meant that there was a high risk that a severed tow rope could fly back into the glider's cockpit and severely damage or even destroy it. The pilots of the towing machine and the glider would communicate back and forth via telephone cable wrapped around the tow line. However, as you might imagine, the heavy strain and violent turbulence the line experienced during flight would often snap the cable and render communication between the two impossible. Another major cause of glider crashes is the fact that many tow pilots either disengaged the tow line too early or executed evasive maneuvers that a fully loaded glider behind them couldn't follow. Additionally, gliders needed brakes to decelerate. However, small arms and debris during landing often damaged these crucial systems, causing many gliders to crash at dizzying speeds of 80 to 100 miles per hour. One major disaster involving the Horsa glider actually occurred during its first operational use. On November 19, 1942, during an attack on the German heavy water plant in Norway during Operation Freshman, 2 Horsa gliders towed by 2 Halifax bombers entered southern Norway, loaded with volunteer soldiers. They were tasked with destroying the heavy water plant connected to German research on the atomic bomb, making this the first time that British gliders would be sent out to attack their enemy. Though the crew didn't have much practice in towing gliders and the tug engines had to be modified to accommodate the extra weight of the gliders being pulled behind them, these problems were addressed during the practice tows. Everything seemed set for success. Unfortunately, disaster soon struck, as intercommunication systems between the gliders and tugs broke down almost immediately. One of the towing Halifaxes attempted to fly below the thick cloud coverage and crashed. The shock caused the glider's tow line to loosen, and it crashed as well. The other Halifax continued but could not locate the landing spot due to faulty maps and poor weather. Eventually, its pilot was forced to turn back, and on the return trip, yet another tragedy would strike when the glider and tow ran into incredibly difficult weather, causing the two to part from each other. The glider crashed close to the other Halifax, and the survivors were captured soon after. Another major disaster struck 2 years later during the 88th Troop Carrier Squadron's routine training program on December the 12th, 1944. The 88th Squadron was giving a local orientation ride to members of the 17th Airborne. Horsa glider LJ-132 had made a complete circuit of the airfield and was flying at an altitude of approximately 600 feet when onlookers noticed that the glider had cut loose from its tow and parts of its tail assembly were disintegrating. Furthermore, the left elevator seemed to have broken loose from the horizontal stabilizer, leaving the pilot, Alfred C. Buckner, completely unable to control the glider. Lieutenant John J. Beeman of the pilot tow plane directly behind the glider had this to say: "I saw the left elevator of the Horsa in the front break away. This was followed immediately by the right elevator, at which time the glider pilot cut himself loose. The nose of the glider, at the time of the cutoff, started descending. It continued towards the ground at the same angle and never did flare for landing. It crashed into the ground, hitting a pine tree just before impact. The pine tree sheared off the right wing of the glider. As the glider hit, it began to disintegrate, at which time I had flown out of the line of vision. The glider hit the ground head-on and was smashed in an instant. Tragically, All 31 passengers and 2 crew members were killed upon impact. The cause of this crash, as stated before, was the loss of the left and right elevators during flight. This loss was soon attributed to excessive interior moisture, which had deteriorated the wood and weakened the glue holding the left outboard elevator hinge rib in place. Once this rib was torn loose from the horizontal stabilizer, the left inboard hinge rib was also torn away, leaving the pilot to lose complete vertical control after the right elevator gave way. Following this tragic crash, all 12 gliders of the 88th Squadron were grounded. The 9th Troop Carrier Commander and the commanding officer of the 53rd Wing were also informed that all Horsa gliders on American airfields were to be grounded immediately and thoroughly inspected. While Horsa gliders had drainage holes to help get rid of excessive moisture, this horrific accident would soon prove that not all models had, quote, adequate facilities for inspection of the horizontal stabilizers. Because Horsa gliders were primarily made of wood and the glue used was not waterproof, the damp climate that LJ-132 was continually exposed to caused much of its interior to rot and loosen. Shockingly, however, this rot was completely invisible. It wasn't until inspectors pulled back the plywood that they realized just how bad the situation had become. Well, there is no doubt that Horsa gliders played a significant part of many operations during the 1940s. We can't overlook their downside. The fact of the matter is that the life of a Horsa glider pilot was dangerous. The use of gliders in combat was brief. By the early 1950s, they had entirely disappeared as their function was replaced by the helicopter. And that is where I will leave off today. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, this is Ryan Socash, signing off.